I want to thank every single one of you for sending me an email. If you have any more of your true scary stories, send me an email at horrorstudio1@gmail.com to have your story featured on my channel. And for those 5 people featured in today's videos, I want to thank you so much for sending in your stories. From abusive dads to crazy, possessed ex-girlfriends, grab a blanket, turn off your lights for 5 true scary subscriber horror stories.
My kidnapped experience. I thank you for reading this. First off, I have very rarely talked to anyone about this. If anyone who's reading or listening to this is very sensitive, or may suffer from PTSD from a traumatic childhood and can't handle certain sensitive subjects like rape, then don't listen to this. Except for the very few people who are close to me, family who already know about it, and my boyfriend. I love how you narrate, how you actually care about your subscribers, and actually take the time to read the stories that are written to you. This will be the first time I've went public with this, so hopefully if anyone else has experienced this, it will help them know they're not alone. This is a very personal and traumatic experience, so please, no negative comments. As I stated in my previous story, my father was an abusive, alcoholic drug addict. My mother left him only to become an addict herself. When I was just a little over 2 years old, and my mother was in the psych ward, I was living with my grandmother, my mom's mother. I was sitting in the living room playing with my toys when there was a knock at the door. My grandmother answered it. It was my father asking if he and his new wife could visit me. My grandmother let them in and stood watching for a few minutes. After a while, she left the room to do something, exactly what I don't know. When she returned, my father, his new wife, and I were gone. From what I was told, my grandmother called the police. When they showed up, they told her that even though my mom had full custody of me, there was nothing they could do. My aunt, who died recently, hired a private detective to try and find me. This was way before the Amber Alert. The year was 1985. So my picture was on the back of milk cartons. So my new stepmom and my father had me. Every time my mother's side of the family would get close to finding me, we would move. This continued for many years. As I have said, my father, if you can even call him that, was very abusive. After my brother died, it became worse. Exactly a month after his death, on my birthday, is when things escalated. It was early in the afternoon, and my father was already 3 sheets to the wind, so drunk that I had to help him get to his and my stepmom's bed. I was only 8 years old and very tiny. Puberty had started for me early. Well, developing had anyway. I started to leave out of the room when he said, "Harley, come here." His speech was very slurred and he smelled of rot gut whiskey and beer. I obeyed, even though I was deathly afraid. I walked over to him and asked, "Yes, Daddy?" "Help me get undressed," he said. It wasn't a question, it was an order. My stepmother was at work and I didn't want to get hurt, so I did as he told. He told me to strip him down to his underwear. After that, I turned to leave when he said, "Harley, remove my underwear." I had a very bad speech impediment where I stuttered, and him saying that aggravated it, so I stuttered out, "Why?" His answer chilled me to the bones. I can, unfortunately, still hear this, his voice, and those horrible words to this day. "I want to hold you, that's why." I turned to run out of the room. I don't remember even how far I got from the bed. I didn't make it to the door before everything went black. I don't know how long I was out for, but when I came to it, I felt severe pain in my private area and the back of my head. I used both hands and touched both areas. When I brought them to where I could see them, even though my vision was still a bit blurry, I could see blood. It was warm and sticky on my hands, and the smell filled my nostrils. I was still on the bed. I looked around as everything was starting to sink in. Beside me was a broken Budweiser beer bottle. My father had passed out on the bed, blood covering his private area. I got up as quickly and as quietly as I could and limped to the bathroom on the opposite side of the house. I felt dirty and nasty, and at that moment all I wanted to do was scrub my entire body. I don't know how long I was in the shower, but the water was as hot as I could get it, and I scrubbed until my skin was raw. When the bathroom door opened, I was so scared I dropped the washcloth I was using, which was now stained with my blood, and huddled myself into the corner of the tub. It was my stepmom. She was home from work. She had come in the house and seen a blood trail that went from her room to the bathroom. She had went to her room and seen my father the way he was. Then he followed the blood to where I was. "Harley," she asked, "what happened?" She had gotten a towel for me and helped me out of the tub. I told her everything, and when I was finished, she told me, "You can't tell anyone, because they'll take you from me. You don't want to lose me too, do you?" I shook my head no. "That's a good girl," she said. "Now go put on some clothes." I didn't understand why she had did what she did, and said what she said. I still don't to this day. The abuse continued up until I was 14. We had moved to a small town in Louisiana, and had already been there for a few years. I was part of the goth crowd, wearing long sleeves to cover up the bruises from my father, and the cuts and scars to where I had started cutting myself. I had attempted suicide many times, but never succeeded. One day, while at school, I was in high school, a big fight had broken out. It had never made the newspapers. The small town actually had covered it up. They, like a bunch of other deep south states, were big on football. So my group of friends and I were standing on the side near the football team locker room and heard a girl scream. We immediately ran down to find out what was going on. Some guys from the football team were raping a girl. We automatically jumped in and started hitting. She ran off. The next thing we know, the principal, vice principal, and several school cops were breaking us all up. Unfortunately, my group was expelled from the group, and the football players only got a slap on the wrist. The poor girl was committed to the psychiatric hospital because she tried to hang herself. When I got home, I was standing in the front yard, going over everything in my head. My father came up behind me and punched me in the back of the head. I snapped. I guess I had finally had enough of everything. I blacked out. When I came to, there were 3 police officers pulling me off a bloody pulp that was left of my father. They took me to juvenile hall, where I sat for 3 days. My father was in a coma at the VA hospital. I forgot to mention that he had been a Force Recon Marine sniper during Vietnam. On the 3rd day, 2 deputies came and got me from my cell and told me that the sheriff wanted to talk to me. When I got there, he had me sit down in a chair in front of his desk. He was in his 40s and resembled Sam Elliott. He was wearing a white cowboy hat, and I laughed to myself. His blue eyes stared intently at me, and he said, "There's been some woman here looking for you." My eyebrows raised up. I asked, "What woman?" He answered, "Your mother and grandmother." I was confused. My father told me that she was dead. I said that to the sheriff. He answered, "Your mother's name is Melissa, right?" I answered yes. "Well, then why don't you go give her a call?" I picked up the phone, and he dialed the number. "Hello?" came the voice on the other line. "Mom?" I asked shakily. Even though it had been 12 years, I still recognized her voice. She came and got me immediately, driving all the way from Texas. The moment I saw her, I ran to her, hugged her, tears streaming down my face. Even though it had been 12 years, not only had I recognized her voice, but remembered exactly what she looked like. Fast forward to the age of 18. My mom had gotten a call that my stepmom was very sick and didn't have long to live. So I got to Louisiana as fast as I could. Unfortunately, when I got there, my father had lied. My stepmom had already been gone for some months. I stood outside of the old house that was full of horrible memories for me. He invited me in to meet his new girlfriend. My jaw dropped. My stepmom hadn't even been dead for a year, and he'd already had another woman in her house, her bed. I politely said no, that I had somewhere to go. His face grew dark and angry, and he yelled at me. "Get your devil-worshipping ass off my property, and don't come back!" I stood there, and I looked him straight in the eyes, and with a rage, hate, yet calm voice said, "I hope you die a slow and painful death for everything you did to me." I walked away and never saw him again. When I was older and had my son, a friend of mine who didn't know about what I went through growing up looked my father up. He died in 2008 from lung cancer. He had suffered a long and agonizing death. He had been diagnosed a year after our last meeting. That's my story. For those who have been through what I have, you are not alone. Thank you for taking the time to read this. My stalker story. Hello. I am aware you probably get a lot of stories sent to you often, so you may never see this. I still want to share this horrifying experience with someone, and I want others to know about the risk of talking to people you don't know on social media. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about me before I start the story. I am a female from Australia, age 14. Yes, I'm young. I go to a performing arts school, and I have several mental illnesses including depression, severe anxiety, and ADHD. I also suffer from suicidal thoughts. Okay, I'll start the story now. Everything started when I was 12. I just got in social media, Instagram to be exact. I wasn't really educated properly on the dangers of talking to strangers online. I knew about the risk of talking to strangers in real life, but not the web. As soon as I posted my first photo, I got at least 5 people wanting to follow me. My account was on private. I, being the naive kid I was, accepted them all. One happened to be a man who plays a major role in this story. Let's just call him Ryan. Ryan told me he was 15 years old from Brisbane, Australia. I believed him completely. His profile looked normal with memes. Memes are great, just saying. To pictures I thought were of him. I later realized these pictures were not of him, but of some other boy. Ryan and I became friends, and we seemed to share interests. He and I both liked anime, video games, scary stories, My Chemical Romance, and so much more. I eventually told him about my depression and severe anxiety, as well as my suicidal thoughts. This is when things got slightly twisted. He began telling me that suicide was always the answer, and that nobody would miss me if I killed myself. I actually believe that he was right, since he was older than me. Ryan continued to manipulate me, saying things like, "Your friends don't really care about you, and you have 10 seconds to tell me why your friends love you." It never occurred to me that a 15-year-old should not manipulate young girls like that. Ryan started asking me for my personal information, and I gave it to him. I gave him my bloody address. What was I thinking? My birthday came around, and I got a parcel with no address to send it back to. I opened it up, and it said it was from Ryan. "Happy birthday, little angel. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'm sure you'll like this gift. Message me when you open it. Love from Ryan." That's what it said exactly. It was pretty normal, and so was the gift, I thought. The gift was not normal. Now that I think about it, it was a mug that said, "World's Greatest Wife." What the actual fuck? Things were normal for a while, until Ryan started sending me sexual messages. I'm not going to write what they said, as they were absolutely disgusting. What he sent still makes my stomach churn. Needless to say, I was disturbed and ignored him. One day he sent me a message. "Why are you ignoring me? If you keep not talking to me, I'll pay you a visit tomorrow night." This message terrified me, yet I never told my parents. They didn't even know who Ryan really was. They thought he was a friend from school. So the night he said he'd pay me a visit came. He kept his promise. He came to my house that night at around 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep that night as I kept feeling like I was being watched. Because it was a hot December night, I had my window opened, but I had the fly screen on. After about 2 hours of the feeling of eyes focused on me, I started to hear deep breathing. I assumed it was just my imagination or the wind, until I heard a gruff voice say, "I'm here, my little angel." Someone was outside my window. He thought I was asleep as well. I had my back turned to the window and pretended to be fast asleep. "My angel, are you awake? Please wake up, love. I want to talk to you, beautiful." And so on. Then he started repeating one phrase. "Honey, I'm home." I was only 13 at this time. I was freaking out in my bed, trying to hide sobs. This man could have easily broken the fly screen if he wanted to. That's when my mom came into the room to check on me. She had a torch and must have seen the look of complete horror on my face before flicking on the light and screaming. I spun around to face the window, and a man was looking through my window holding a knife. I would say he was somewhat handsome if it weren't for his smile. It still haunts my nightmares. It was a smile so wide, it looked unnatural and psychotic. We called the police. You know the rest. Turns out it was, you guessed it, Ryan. He had been suspected of doing this to other young children. One had been murdered. I'm lucky I got out of it alive. Sorry if it was short. I give you full consent if you'd like to put this in a video. I have some other stories, but this one was the scariest. A man in the woods. Hello. I would like to start off by saying I live in a very small town and would not like to give out my name, but I will say I'll be 16 in a few days. I am a big fan and have been subscribed for a while now and love listening to your videos. Anyways, I will continue with my story. The other day, me and my friend, I'll call her Bean in the story because that's her nickname, went to a normal smoking spot in the woods. To get to our spot, you have to walk past this park and up this thin road. On one side, it's almost a straight drop with trees all the way down to a stream, and at the bottom on the other side, it's a straight climb up with a huge rock on top for the first 20 minutes of the walk. After that, it's a heavily wooded area. So about 5 minutes into the walk, we stopped because I wanted to take pictures for a school project. Well, as I took out my phone, she looked up and noticed movement in an opening in the rock. She stood there and looked closer and saw a man in a brown jacket, brown pants, and wearing sunglasses, trying not to be seen. She said nothing about it until later in the day because she said she didn't want to scare me. So, after about 20 minutes of us walking, we get to the opening and go in. We sit down and start to smoke and talk about everything that happened. The day goes on as normal, until I see a man in a brown jacket looking out at us from behind a tree. I scream and scare Bean, but then rationalize it as just being a tree or something. We were kinda buzzed, so it was possible. So about 4 minutes pass, and we hear leaves and branches crunch from behind us. Me, thinking it was just my sister, yelled to her because she said she was staying home, but Bean nudged me to shut the hell up because it was one of our town's biggest criminals and drug dealers. I panicked and shoved everything in my bag, but realized that we would have to pass him to leave. Freaking out, I looked at Bean with a "what the fuck do we do" look on my face, which she only replied with a shrug and tugged my arm. I got up, bag on my shoulder, and walked the trail leading to the road, trying to keep my gaze low so I don't have to talk to this guy. Shaking, scared, and wanted to leave, I feel a hand on my arm and a voice ask, "Are you lost or something?" At this point, panic mode has kicked in, but I'm usually pretty cool under pressure, so I say, "Oh no, we just kinda got tired and needed to sit. Thanks though." He gave me an odd look, peered behind me, and then began to just walk away. I didn't protest to this action and almost ran full speed out of there. Now, as Bean and I were walking down the road, we heard yelling, not scared, just heated, argumentative yelling. I looked up expecting to see someone, but I didn't. The encounter is not the only one I've had. Since that day, I've seen him following me and my friends down alleys. The day in the woods, I took a photo in the corner behind a tree. It looks like a hood. Late night walk. This had just happened earlier around 2 a.m. It's 3:40 a.m. now. I'm starting soccer in about 2 weeks. My tryouts are around 6:30 p.m. I wanted to see if my agility was still as good as it was last season. My dog Lulu looked like she wanted to use the bathroom, so instead of putting her out, I went on a run with her. She goes on runs with me even if she doesn't have to use the bathroom. So when we go on walks, we walk only around 1 block. We always walk the same way every time. This was my first time walking at night or early in the morning. This all happened on August 16th, 2016, around 2 a.m. So I walked up the street with Lulu and thought about all the other stories you shared from fans on your channel. I thought about how I shouldn't do this, but I was in a safe neighborhood. Or so I thought. About near the end of my street, I thought, should I really be doing this? But apparently, what went through my mind an hour ago told me not to be worried and keep going, so I did. All the way at the end, I debated if I should go left or right. I went right, so I didn't have to be exposed to the street when I went left. I remembered I had to turn right 3 more times to be back on my street. I thought about how I may have been able to cut through the ditch to make it quicker, but then I remembered that I was with my dog. And at the end was a few feet high hill that both her and I would have to climb, so I skipped cutting through the ditch. There was another reason why I skipped the ditch. There are about 5 bad people in my neighborhood. 2 of them happened to be in the ditch at the time when I was on the walk. It looked like one of them had a knife while the other had nothing. My dog saved me once from a robbery and kidnapping, but that's another story for another time. So I thought if they come near me, she would protect me. When I finally got past the ditch, I heard whispers. They were loud. I looked behind me and saw a truck with its headlights on. It pulled up next to my dog and I. The man inside of the truck was a good man. He asked if I was okay. I was. So he said, if there's trouble, just yell, okay? By this time, I was halfway down the 2nd block, thinking. I heard people behind me, so I started jogging. I picked up my pace after I heard feet slapping on the asphalt. I took a sharp turn and dove down with my dog. I had to hold her muzzle shut or she would start barking. After 5 minutes, I got back up, then started running for my house and not giving a fucking fuck at this time. When I got home and in my house, I could hear sirens going off. But anyways, I was glad I made it home safely. Thankfully, let's hope I don't run into those men ever again. Crazy X, Paranormal. Hello. So I've debated sharing a Crazy X story for a while now. I've frequented quite a few narrators as of late, and do appreciate your channel quite a bit. I don't tend to share a lot of my past experiences because, well, let's face it, a lot of things are not fun to talk about. But I figured I'd give this a shot and see if you'd appreciate this personal experience on your channel. Also, it'd be awesome to remain anonymous, because not a lot of my friends know about this story. They just know about this X. Just now, how dark the rabbit hole goes. And now my story. High school is a place and an experience filled of emotions, finding individuality or hiding it. Regardless of that, it's over shortly and generally is filled of stories. Some that could be wild and crazy, and others that can be quite calm and sentimental. Well, one of my stories from life started in high school and didn't end until a few years after. This particular story involves a girl that I had fallen for, who turned out to not just want to have a relationship, but rather to own my existence. She was very close to doing this too, but luckily, I managed to scrape some remnants of my former self together and leave her behind. Over the almost 4 years together, there are several incidences that I could cite which many people would deem crazy. But one incident has plagued my nightmares and makes me thankful for dreamless nights. One night, when we were about 17, my girlfriend and I were Skyping. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah was different from me in many ways, and one of these ways was the fact that she was religious and I'm not. This night, she made me question my principles, though. We were Skyping, and Sarah began to recount a memory from her childhood, how she used to live in this house when she was little, and she played with her friend on the street, then go home to her family and her dog. She said the house was different, though, that there was an evil presence there, and one day, that presence had attached itself to her. Of course, I didn't believe her. I was too skeptical and never very religious. But then things started to get weird. On another night, we had signed into Skype with each other like usual and started a conversation. Sarah, though, looked distant and distracted. She told me that she was afraid of something but wasn't quite sure of what it was. There were several times in our conversation she'd hear something and look away but then brush it off. Getting close to around midnight, though, Sarah started to act very peculiar. She closed her eyes and fell against her pillow. We often Skyped late into the night, lying on our beds. I called out to her, "Babe, are you okay? Did you fall asleep?" Assuming that she had nodded off, I was about to end the call, but before I did, she started to get up. I greeted her. "Oh, hey babe, I thought you'd fallen asleep." She was silent, though with a very strange smile on her face. I spoke to her again and there was no response, just her looking at me with that strange smile. Then I noticed something even more odd about her. Her eyes were pale green, which under normal circumstances wouldn't be of alarm, but Sarah's eyes were blue, sometimes gray but never green. I wasn't sure what was going on, and I must have seemed frightened because she started to laugh, that same disturbing smile on her face. Still not comprehending fully, I asked, "Babe, what is it? What's so funny?" She replied to me, looking into the camera, so as if she was staring at me, stating that Sarah wasn't here right now. I asked, "What do you mean?" She replied again, recounting Sarah's experience at her old childhood house. Even though I was freaked out, I admit, I still thought Sarah may have been messing around, so I told her to knock it off already. Instead, she just looked at me with those pale green eyes and that creepy smile and pulled a razor from under her pillow. She put it against her lips. "What the fuck are you gonna do with that?" I had asked her. No response again. Instead, she just started cutting, shredding her arm to bits, deep cuts that gushed out over her pillow. I couldn't find my voice at first as I watched in horror. She never took her eyes off the camera and just kept that same cruel smile. Eventually, I snapped out of it and started screaming at my computer, calling her name, telling her to stop, asking her what the hell she was doing. I tried calling her on the phone, but nothing. After what seemed to last forever, but in reality probably only was a few minutes, she passed out again. I was crying so hard. There was so much blood, and I kept calling her name, trying to see if she was alright. Eventually, Sarah woke up again, and she looked at me with her blue eyes and asked me why I was crying. I only managed to say, "Your arm." When she looked down, she almost screamed. Her pillow was covered in blood, and there were so many slash marks. She got up and went to the bathroom to stop the bleeding. I just laid there, shocked, not knowing what to do or what to say. And when she came back, she asked me what had happened. After a few minutes of my crying, I finally calmed down enough to tell her. She was so scared. We didn't sleep that night. This story comes from many, and honestly, I'm still not sure if what I saw was truly a possession, but it haunts me all the time. I know it seems cruel to not have some inclination of believing this event, but Sarah, well, she was very good at manipulating people, and I was not immune to this.